Forget campfire ghost stories. This is a true account of a missing hiker on the Appalachian Trail, so disturbing it will haunt your dreams. Every detail of this incident screams horror, leaving you with a deep, unsettling dread. Are you brave enough to confront the terrifying reality of what lurks beyond the familiar trail? Before we dive into this nightmare, if you're new here, hit that subscribe button. We're posting daily videos of the most terrifying true cases, and we've set a goal to reach 1,000 subscribers by New Year's. Help us get there, and you'll never miss another chilling story. This is the story of Margaret Brennan. Everyone called her Maggie. In July 2013, she stepped off the Appalachian Trail to use the bathroom and never found her way back. What happened next, documented in her own handwriting over 26 days of slow starvation, is one of the most disturbing cases in the trail's history. But it's not just the tragedy that makes this case so haunting. It's what Maggie wrote in her final days, what she claimed to see in the darkness outside her tent. And the question that still haunts everyone who knows the full story: was she really alone out there? Maggie was 64 years old, a retired Air Force nurse from Tennessee with years of hiking experience. She wasn't some inexperienced weekend warrior who'd gotten in over her head. She'd spent decades hiking the trails near her home in the Smoky Mountains. She'd taken courses in wilderness survival, map reading, and emergency first aid. She was meticulous in her preparation, almost obsessive about it. Her gear was top quality. Her planning was thorough. She knew the risks, and she trained for them. The Appalachian Trail wasn't just a dream for her. It was a promise she'd made to herself decades earlier. After spending her entire adult life caring for others, after raising her daughter Emma and supporting her husband Roger through his own demanding career, she finally had time for herself. Time to test her limits. Time to prove she could still do hard things. Time to walk through the wilderness and find whatever it was she was looking for out there among the trees and mountains. She started at Harper's Ferry, West Virginia in April 2013, hiking north toward Mount Catard in Maine, over 1,100 miles through mountains, forests, and wilderness. It would take her approximately 6 months if everything went according to plan. Her best friend, Patricia Moore, who'd been planning this journey with her for 3 years, would hike alongside her. Roger would meet them every few days at road crossings with supplies, fresh food, clean clothes, and encouragement. For 2 months, everything went perfectly. Better than perfectly, actually. Maggie and Patricia fell into an easy rhythm on the trail. Wake before dawn, break camp, hike until afternoon, set up camp, sleep, repeat. The repetition was meditative. The physical challenge was invigorating. The scenery was breathtaking. Maggie earned her trail name early on. A faster hiker passing them on the trail in Virginia had jokingly called her Inchworm because of her slow but steady pace. The name stuck. Maggie didn't mind. She wore it with pride. She wasn't racing anyone. She was savoring every mile, every vista, every moment of this journey she'd waited so long to begin. Fellow hikers loved her. She was always prepared, always willing to share supplies or advice, always smiling despite exhaustion. She kept detailed notes in her journal about the trail, the people she met, the challenges she faced. Reading those early entries, you can feel her joy radiating off the pages. This was exactly where she wanted to be, doing exactly what she wanted to do. Then, in late June, while they were hiking through New Hampshire, Patricia received a phone call that changed everything. Her mother had fallen and broken her hip. The injury was serious. Patricia needed to leave the trail immediately to fly home and help care for her. Patricia was devastated. She begged Maggie to wait until next year. They'd finish the trail together, she promised. They'd trained together, planned together, dreamed about this for 3 years. It should end together too, but Maggie refused. She was 64 years old. Her health was good now, but who knew what next year would bring? Time wasn't guaranteed at her age. Every day was a gift, and she didn't want to waste it. She'd come this far. She was strong. She was prepared. She could finish alone. Roger supported her decision completely. He'd been married to her for 38 years, and he knew that determined look in her eyes. He knew that once Maggie made up her mind about something, there was no talking her out of it. And honestly, he was proud of her. His wife was 64 years old and hiking over 1,000 miles through mountains. How many people her age could say that? Patricia left the trail in tears, making Maggie promise to be careful, to check in regularly, to not take any unnecessary risks. Maggie promised she'd be fine. She was always fine. She was inchworm, slow and steady, prepared for anything. The next few weeks were harder without Patricia, but Maggie pushed on. She was slower now, more cautious, but she was making progress. Other hikers became her temporary companions. She'd hike near them for a day or two, share a shelter for the night, then they'd move on at their own pace. The trail community was supportive like that. You were never truly alone, even when you were hiking solo. By mid-July, Maggie had reached Maine. The terrain here was different from anything she'd encountered so far. Steeper, rockier, more remote. The sections between resupply points were longer. The shelters were more sparse. This was the part of the trail that separated the casual hikers from the serious ones. This was where the real wilderness began. On July 21st, Maggie reached Poplar Ridge Lean-To in western Maine. She was less than 200 miles from Mount Katahdin now, from the end of her journey. Just 3 more days of hiking to meet Roger at Route 27, and then she'd push through the final stretch to the summit. She was exhausted, but exhilarated. She could taste victory now. She was going to finish. After 6 months, after over 1,000 miles, she was actually going to finish. She spent that night at Poplar Ridge with several other hikers. A woman named Dorothy Phillips, who was section hiking the trail, later told investigators that Maggie seemed tired but in good spirits. They talked for a while about the trail, about the challenges ahead, about what it felt like to be so close to the end. Maggie mentioned that she missed Patricia, missed having someone to share the experience with, but she was proud of herself for continuing alone. She was proving something to herself out here. She was proving she was still strong, still capable, still adventurous, even at 64. The morning of July 22nd started perfectly. Clear skies, comfortable temperature, a light breeze. At 6:30 a.m., Dorothy Phillips took Maggie's photograph outside the shelter. In it, Maggie stands with her full backpack, her hiking poles in hand, smiling despite the obvious fatigue on her face. Her grey hair is pulled back in a ponytail. Her glasses reflect the morning sun. She looks happy, accomplished, ready for another day. It would be the last photograph ever taken of her alive. Maggie left the shelter at 7:15 a.m. She texted Roger before she started hiking. About to leave shelter? Don't worry about getting stuff for 100-mile wilderness. The message troubled Roger slightly when he received it. It sounded like Maggie might be reconsidering her plans, maybe thinking about cutting the trip short. But he didn't call to ask about it. He trusted her judgment. She'd call him if she needed anything. The trail that day would take her approximately 9.4 miles north to the Spalding Lean-To. From there, she'd hike another 13 miles to Route 27, where Roger would be waiting on July 24th. Standard distance for her pace, nothing unusual. She'd done longer days than this. Other hikers saw her that morning. A couple from Boston passed her around 9 a.m. They said hello, asked how she was doing. She smiled and said she was good, just taking it slow. A solo male hiker saw her around 10 a.m. He was moving faster and passed her on a steep section. He remembered her because she stepped aside to let him pass and made a joke about being the slow one on the trail today. That was the last confirmed sighting of Margaret Brennan alive. At approximately 11:01 a.m., somewhere along the trail between Poplar Ridge and Spalding, Maggie stopped. She needed to use the bathroom. This was completely normal on the trail. There were no facilities out here in the wilderness. When nature called, you stepped off the trail, found a private spot, did your business, and came back. Hikers did this multiple times every day. It was routine. Maggie stepped off the trail into the dense Maine forest. The undergrowth here was thick. Hemlock trees towered overhead, their branches creating a canopy that blocked out much of the sunlight. The forest floor was covered in pine needles, moss, fallen branches, and thick brush. It all looked the same in every direction, green and brown and shadow. She walked maybe 50 feet from the trail, far enough for privacy. She could still see the trail from where she stopped, or at least she thought she could. When she finished and turned around, everything looked different. The trail should have been right there. She'd only walked 50 feet, maybe less, but she couldn't see it. She couldn't see the blue and white blazes that mark the path every 100 feet or so. Everything looked the same. Trees in every direction. No path. Just endless forest. Don't panic, she told herself. It's right there. You just got turned around. She walked in what she thought was the right direction. Nothing. She walked in another direction. Still nothing. She tried a third direction. The forest just kept going. Thick and endless, and all looking exactly the same. She checked her watch. She'd been searching for 20 minutes now. Her heart was starting to race. This was fine. This was manageable. She was an experienced hiker. She knew what to do. She stopped and listened carefully, trying to hear other hikers on the trail. But the forest was silent. No voices, no footsteps, no sound of anyone nearby. After an hour of searching, panic was setting in properly now. Maggie pulled out her phone. Her hands were shaking as she typed a message to Roger. In some trouble. Got off trail to go to BR, now lost. Can you call AMC to C if a trail maintainer can help me? Somewhere north of Woods Road. XOX. She hit send. The message failed. She stared at the screen in disbelief. No service. No bars. The message just sat there, unsent, mocking her. She tried again. Failed. Again. Failed. She spent the next 90 minutes trying to send that message, moving to different spots, holding her phone up high, trying to find even a single bar of service. She tried 11 times. Every single attempt failed. By early afternoon, Maggie had to make a decision. She remembered her survival training. If you're lost, stay in one place. Make yourself visible. Wait for rescue. But she also needed cell service to call for help. Higher ground usually meant better signal. If she could just get to higher ground, she could call Roger and this would all be over. She chose to move. It was the wrong decision, though she couldn't have known that at the time. She began walking west, thinking she was heading toward higher elevation. In reality, she was moving away from the trail with every step. The terrain was brutal. Steep inclines, fallen trees that forced her to detour, dense brush that tore at her clothes and scratched her skin. But she pushed on, driven by the desperate hope that just over the next ridge, just past the next cluster of trees, she'd find a signal. On July 23rd at 4:18 p.m., more than 24 hours after she'd first gotten lost, Maggie tried texting Roger again. Lost since yesterday. Off trail 3 or 4 miles. Call police for what to do else. XOX. The message failed. She tried twice more. Both failed. Her phone battery was at 30% now. She'd been checking it obsessively, watching it drain with each failed attempt to reach help. She'd been lost for over 24 hours now. Her trail mix was running low. She had maybe 2 days of food left if she rationed carefully. Water was becoming a concern. She'd found a small stream and filled her bottles, using her purification tablets to make it safe to drink. The temperature was dropping as evening approached. She needed to make camp. Maggie found a small clearing on a ridge, surrounded by hemlock trees. The spot had a slight elevation advantage, and she thought maybe, just maybe, search teams would be able to spot her here from a helicopter. She remembered her survival training clearly now. Stay in one place. Make yourself visible. Conserve energy. Don't wander. They'll find you. She set up her small tent carefully, making sure it was secure. She strung up her emergency solar blanket between 2 trees. The reflective silver surface might catch light from a search helicopter. She gathered some rocks and arranged them in a large help sign on the highest part of the ridge. It took her 2 hours and left her exhausted, but it might make the difference. As darkness fell on that first night in the clearing, Maggie pulled out her journal. She'd been keeping detailed notes throughout her hike, documenting everything from the miles she covered to the people she met to her thoughts and feelings along the way. Now she began documenting her survival. July 23rd entry. I made a terrible mistake. Left trail to use bathroom and now I can't find my way back. Tried to text Roger but no signal. Walked west looking for higher ground, still no signal. Setting up camp here. They'll find me. Roger knows my route. He knows I was supposed to meet him on the 24th. When I don't show up, he'll report me missing. Search teams will come. The helicopters will come. I just have to wait. Just have to stay here and wait. So stupid. So stupid. All I had to do was count my steps when I left the trail, count my steps and walk straight back. But I panicked. I got turned around, and now I'm here. But they'll find me. I know they will. Meanwhile, 13 miles away at the Route 27 crossing, Roger was setting up his own camp in the parking area. Maggie wasn't due until tomorrow, but he liked to arrive early. He'd brought her favourite meal to cook when she arrived. Fresh vegetables, pasta, a bottle of wine. They'd celebrate how close she was to finishing. Just 13 miles from here to this spot, then she'd push on to the final stretch. She'd done it. His wife had actually done it. The next morning, July 24th, Roger woke early and made coffee. He checked his phone, hoping for a message from Maggie saying she was ahead of schedule. Nothing. That was fine. She'd message when she got closer. He spent the day reading, napping, watching the trailhead for any sign of hikers approaching. By noon, he was checking his phone constantly. By 3 p.m., he was worried. By 5 p.m., he was very worried. By 7 p.m., when the sun was setting and Maggie still hadn't arrived or called, he knew something was wrong. Maggie was never late. Never. She was obsessively punctual, always keeping to her schedule. If she was running behind, she would have called. If she'd decided to stop at the shelter for another night, she would have texted. The silence was wrong. Everything about this was wrong. Roger drove to the nearest ranger station. His hands were shaking as he explained the situation to the ranger on duty. His wife was missing. She was supposed to meet him at Route 27 over 12 hours ago. She wasn't answering her phone. Something had happened. They needed to start searching now. The ranger took down all the information. Maggie's description, what she was wearing, her hiking experience, her last known location, her planned route. He assured Roger that they'd begin search operations first thing in the morning. People were late sometimes, they got tired and stopped early. They got talking with other hikers and lost track of time. She'd probably show up tonight or tomorrow morning with a perfectly reasonable explanation. But Roger knew better. He'd been married to Maggie for 38 years. He knew her habits, her personality, her reliability. If she wasn't here, something had happened, something bad. That night, Roger couldn't sleep. He sat in his car at the Route 27 parking area, staring at the trailhead, willing Maggie to appear. She never did. In her clearing 13 miles away, Maggie also couldn't sleep. She'd heard helicopters that afternoon. The sound had filled her with hope. They were searching. Roger had reported her missing. Help was coming. She'd waved her solar blanket frantically, shouted until her throat was raw, tried to make her camp as visible as possible. But the helicopters never came close enough. The forest was so dense, the canopy overhead so thick that seeing her from above would have been nearly impossible. July 24th journal entry. Second night, heard helicopters this morning. 3 of them, I think, flying search patterns. Tried to signal with my emergency mirror. The solar blanket is strung up between trees. Made help sign with rocks on the ridge. Tried making a fire to create smoke signal, but the wood is too wet from morning dew, won't catch. Rationing trail mix carefully. Maybe 3 days worth if I'm really careful. Found small stream about 200 feet from camp. Water tastes clean. Using purification tablets just to be safe. Roger must be so worried. Emma probably knows by now too. They're looking for me. I can hear them looking. They just need to come a little closer. Just a little closer, and they'll find me. By the morning of July 25th, the search was in full operation. The Maine Warden Service had mobilized every available resource. State police, volunteer search and rescue teams, trained tracking dogs, and helicopters with thermal imaging equipment. Over 100 searchers were deployed within the first 48 hours. It was an impressive response coordinated by Lieutenant Kevin Adams, a veteran search and rescue coordinator with 19 years of experience. They focused their efforts on the trail section between Poplar Ridge Lean-To and Spalding Lean-To, the route Maggie should have been hiking. Teams spread out along the trail, searching the surrounding forest, checking every shelter, every campsite, every water source. They interviewed other hikers, asking if anyone had seen Maggie, if anyone had heard anything unusual, if anyone had found any gear or signs of disturbance. The tracking dogs were brought in. These were specialized search and rescue dogs, trained to follow human scent through difficult terrain. They picked up Maggie's scent at Poplar Ridge Lean-To, where she'd spent the night. The scent trail led north along the Appalachian Trail exactly as expected. The dogs followed it for several miles, their handlers watching carefully as the dogs worked. But then something strange happened. At a certain point along the trail, the dogs lost the scent. Completely. It was as if Maggie had simply vanished into thin air at that exact spot. The handlers tried repeatedly to pick up the trail again, circling the area, trying different approaches, nothing. The scent was just gone. This was unusual, but not unheard of. Water crossings could wash away scent. Rocky terrain could make it difficult to track. Heavy rain could eliminate scent trails completely. But there had been no rain. There was no nearby water crossing. The terrain was no different here than anywhere else on the trail. The handlers couldn't explain it, but they noted the location and moved on, trying to pick up the scent elsewhere. What they didn't know was that Maggie had stepped off the trail at almost exactly that spot. The dogs had been right there, mere yards from where she'd left the trail to use the bathroom. But the scent trail leading into the forest was faint, confused, wandering. Maggie had walked in circles, searching for the trail, doubling back, trying different directions. The scent wasn't a clear path. It was a confused tangle that was impossible for the dogs to follow. Helicopters flew overhead, their thermal cameras scanning the forest canopy for any sign of heat signature that might indicate a person. But the dense hemlock forest blocked most of the thermal readings, and Maggie, huddled in her tent during the day to conserve energy, wasn't generating enough heat to register on the cameras through the tree cover. July 26th. Fourth day, I think. Losing track of time. Phone battery died this morning. Should have turned it off earlier, saved the battery. Stupid. Heard more helicopters. They sound so close. Right overhead. I waved the solar blanket. I screamed and screamed. Why can't they see me? Why can't they hear me? The forest swallows every sound. I yell and it's like the trees just absorb it. At night I hear things moving around my tent. Probably just animals. Deer maybe. Maybe a bear. I bang on the tent and the sounds stop for a while. Then they start again. Just animals. Have to be. Have to stay in tent at night. Too dark to see anything. July 27th brought what the searchers thought was a major breakthrough. A local inn owner contacted the Maine Warden Service with important information. She'd received a voicemail from a hiker, a woman saying she'd spent the night at Spalding Lean-To with Inchworm, the missing hiker. The message was somewhat garbled, the connection had been poor, but the inn owner was certain she'd heard the word Inchworm. The search teams immediately shifted their focus to the Spalding Lean-To area. If Maggie had made it to Spalding, that changed everything. It meant she'd gotten further than they thought. It meant she might be ahead of schedule, might have pushed on past the shelter. It completely changed the search parameters. Additional teams were deployed to Spalding. They interviewed every hiker who'd stayed there in the past week. 3 teenage boys came forward with what seemed like confirmation. They remembered seeing a quiet woman with glasses near Spalding Lean-To. She'd been sitting alone, seemed tired. They hadn't spoken to her beyond a brief hello, but they were certain they'd seen her. The searchers concentrated their efforts around Spalding now, deploying ground teams, dogs, and aerial searches in a wide radius around the shelter. They searched for 2 full days, covering every inch of terrain, checking every possible route she might have taken from Spalding. Meanwhile, 8 miles away in her clearing, Maggie listened to the helicopters in the distance. They were searching the wrong area. She didn't know that, of course. She just knew they weren't close enough. The sound of the helicopters gave her hope and despair in equal measure. They were looking, but they weren't finding her. July 28th. Trail mix gone. Finished the last of it this morning. So hungry. Stomach cramping constantly. The stream water helps fill my stomach, but it doesn't stop the hunger. Makes me feel hollow. Tried making the help sign bigger with more rocks. Took me hours. Had to rest every few minutes. So tired. Muscles feel weak. Heard voices yesterday afternoon. Men's voices talking. Thought search team had finally found me. Rushed toward the voices, calling out, waving my arms. Just whine through the trees. This forest plays tricks on your mind. Makes you hear things that aren't there. Have to stay focused. Have to stay in the clearing. They'll find me. They have to find me. On July 30th, after 7 days of intensive searching with no results, The formal search operations were suspended. It wasn't that they were giving up, Lieutenant Adams explained to Roger. It was a matter of resources. They'd searched thousands of acres. They'd interviewed dozens of hikers. They'd deployed every tool at their disposal. Without new information, without some indication of where Maggie might be, continuing the massive search operation wasn't productive. They'd keep the case open. Rangers would continue to look during their normal patrols. If any new information came in, they'd mobilize immediately. But the active search, the helicopters, and the hundreds of volunteers had to be scaled back. Roger refused to accept this. He couldn't. His wife was out there somewhere, alive or dead, and he wasn't going to stop looking until he found her. He rented a room at a motel near the trail. Every day he hiked sections of the trail himself, calling Maggie's name until his voice gave out, searching the forest, looking for any sign of her. Emma flew in from California to join him. Together, father and daughter walked through the wilderness, hoping for a miracle. In her tent, Maggie's journal entries became increasingly desperate and confused. August 1st. Don't know exact date anymore. Maybe August? Maybe still July. Phone died, so I can't check. Tried to save battery, but kept checking for signal like an idiot. Now I have no way to tell time except sun position. Even that's hard because of the tree cover. Days blending together. Can't remember if I've been here 5 days or 7. Haven't eaten in... how long? 5 days? 6. Body feels strange. Lightheaded when I stand up. Hands shaking when I write. Have to grip the pen hard to keep it steady. Still hear helicopters, but not as often. Are they giving up? Did they already give up? No. Roger wouldn't let them give up. I know Roger. He's still out there. He's still looking. He'd never stop looking. I just have to hold on. Just have to stay alive until he finds me. August 3rd, estimated date. Something's wrong with my mind, seeing things that aren't there. Yesterday I saw a deer at the edge of the clearing. At least I thought it was a deer. But when I looked closer, it was standing on 2 legs. Just standing there, watching me. I blinked and it was gone. Hunger hallucinations. Read about them once. Brain starts making things up when body is starving. Have to remember that. Have to remember nothing I see is real. But last night was different. Heard something outside tent. Not deer sounds. Not bear sounds. Footsteps. Human footsteps. Circling tent. Slow circles. I called out. Asked if someone was there. If search team had found me. Silence. Just silence. Then the footsteps continued. Around and around. I was too scared to look out. Stayed in sleeping bag with eyes closed. Eventually the sounds stopped. Morning came. Checked outside. No footprints in the dirt. Nothing. Just my imagination. Just the hunger playing tricks. August 5th estimated. It came back, whatever it is. Every night now. Comes to the clearing after dark. Stands at the edge. Just stands there. I can feel it watching me. I don't look anymore. Keep my eyes closed tight. Pretend to sleep. Sometimes it circles the tent. Slow, deliberate circles. Sometimes it stops right at the tent opening. Right there. Just inches away from me. I can hear breathing. Heavy breathing. Not animal breathing. Something else. I hold my breath. Count to 10, 20, 30. Eventually it moves on. Continues circling. What is it? Why won't it leave? Why won't it just finish this? Would be better than dying like this. So slow. So hungry. Can't think straight anymore. Body eating itself. Can feel it. Muscle gone. Just bone and skin now. Skin hanging loose. Ribs showing. Face gaunt when I touch it. Barely recognize myself. On August 6th, nearly 2 weeks into her ordeal, Maggie wrote the entry that would later break the hearts of everyone who read it. She'd been lying in her tent, too weak to move, watching the sunlight filter through the trees. She'd come to a realization. She wasn't getting out of here. Search teams weren't coming. Her body was shutting down. She was going to die in this clearing, in this tent, alone in the wilderness. The question was how long it would take and whether anyone would ever find her remains. She'd spent her whole life being practical. She'd been a military nurse. She'd seen death. She understood it. She wasn't afraid of it, not really. She was just sad. Sad that this was how her adventure ended. Sad that Roger and Emma would suffer not knowing what happened to her. Sad that she'd been so close to finishing the trail, to accomplishing her dream, and a single mistake had taken it all away. So she did what she'd always done. She planned. She organized. She tried to make the situation easier for the people she loved, even though she wouldn't be there to see it. When you find my body, please call my husband Roger and my daughter Emma. It will be the greatest kindness for them to know that I am dead and where you found me, no matter how many years from now. Please find it in your heart to mail the contents of this bag to one of them. After writing that note, Maggie spent hours composing letters to Roger and Emma. Her hand was shaky, the writing barely legible in places, but she pushed through. She needed them to know how much she loved them. She needed them to know this wasn't their fault. She needed them to know she was at peace with what was coming. To Emma, she wrote about being proud of the woman she'd become, about living life fully and taking risks and not waiting for the perfect moment, because the perfect moment never comes. About finding adventure wherever you can and not being afraid to try difficult things. About how much joy Emma had brought to her life and how grateful she was to be her mother. To Roger, she wrote about 38 years of marriage and how every one of those years had been a gift. About how he'd supported every crazy dream she'd ever had, including this one. About how she should have been more careful, should have counted her steps, should have listened to Patricia and waited until next year. About how no hike, no mountain, no trail was more important than him, and she was sorry for being stubborn. About how she hoped he would forgive her for this and move on and find happiness again. After finishing the letters, Maggie took care of practical matters. She found her credit card in her wallet and used her camping knife to cut it into pieces. She buried the pieces near the tent so that no one could steal her identity or exploit her accounts after she was gone. She kept her driver's license in a waterproof bag, along with her journal and letters, so that whoever found her body could easily identify her and contact her family. She organized her remaining supplies neatly, stacked her pots and pans, folded her clothes, organized her first aid kit, put everything in order. Even in death, Maggie Brennan wanted to maintain some dignity and control. She folded her glasses carefully and placed them in a storage pocket on the side of her tent. She wouldn't need them much longer. Her vision was blurry anyway from dehydration and weakness. She lay down in her sleeping bag and zipped it up. The nights were getting colder. The sleeping bag helped conserve what little body heat she was still generating. August 8th. 2 weeks, maybe 3, maybe more. Stop trying to count. Doesn't matter anymore. Body shutting down. Can barely sit up to write this. Have to rest between sentences. Strange thing. I'm not scared anymore. Was terrified at first. Panicked. Desperate. Now, I'm just tired. So tired. Ready for it to end. Whatever comes at night hasn't hurt me. Just watches. Just waits. Maybe it's death. Maybe death comes slow like this. Watching and waiting until body is ready to go. Maybe I'm just crazy from starvation and there's nothing there at all. Brain making up company so I'm not completely alone. Funny. Spent whole life afraid of dying. Now I just want it to come. Want it to be quick. Want it to be peaceful. Roger, if you ever read this, I love you. I love you so much. Emma, baby, I love you. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for all of this. August 10th. Heard voices again this morning. Men's voices calling my name. Maggie, Maggie, over and over. Search team, they're here. They finally found me. Tried to call back, but no sound came out. Throat too dry. Voice gone. Tried to crawl to tent opening. Had to get outside so they could see me. Managed to unzip sleeping bag, but couldn't move. Arms too weak. Legs too weak. Just laid there listening to voices get closer. Then farther away. Then gone. They were right there. Right there. And I couldn't make a sound. Couldn't move. Just laid there like an idiot while they walked away. They're not coming back. I know they're not. This was my chance, and I was too weak to take it. Several lines are scratched out after this, the writing angry and jagged and illegible. Then, in shakier handwriting, it's in the tent. It's finally in the tent. Been circling for days, watching from outside. Now it's inside with me. Can see it. Dark shape. Tall. At foot of sleeping bag. Not moving, just standing there. Watching. Waiting. Hello? I said. "Are you death? Are you here to take me?" It didn't answer, doesn't speak, just stands there, breathing, that heavy breathing. Been hearing it for days outside, now, inside, with me. Should be scared, but I'm not. Almost relieved, almost glad. Means it's almost over. "Come on then," I told it. "I'm ready, just make it quick. Please make it quick." The entry ends there abruptly, mid-thought, as if Maggie had lost consciousness while writing. On what might have been August 18th, though investigators later believed Maggie had lost track of dates by this point, there is one final entry. Just a single line in handwriting, so shaky it's barely legible. "Forgive me." Nothing comes after that. The journal is blank for the remaining pages. For 2 years, Roger never stopped looking. He returned to Maine every few months, spending weeks at a time hiking the trails, searching the forests, following up on every tip and lead no matter how unlikely. He hired 3 different private investigators. He offered a $25,000 reward for information leading to finding Maggie. He made appearances on local news programs, holding up Maggie's photograph, begging anyone who'd seen anything to come forward. Emma joined him when she could, taking time off from her job in California to fly out and help search. Together, father and daughter walked through the wilderness their wife and mother had loved so much, calling her name, hoping for a miracle they both knew probably wouldn't come. The Maine Warden Service continued periodic searches following every lead that came in, and there were hundreds of leads. Psychics called claiming to have visions of where Maggie was. Hikers reported seeing women matching her description in Tennessee, Minnesota, Canada, even Florida. Each report had to be followed up. Each sighting had to be investigated. None led anywhere. One particularly disturbing tip suggested that Bigfoot was responsible for Maggie's disappearance. The caller, who refused to give their name, insisted that several hikers had gone missing in that area over the years, and that Bigfoot was known to inhabit those forests. Lieutenant Adams dutifully added the tip to the case file, but no one took it seriously. As the months dragged on with no results, the prevailing theories shifted. Perhaps Maggie had left the trail voluntarily, experiencing some kind of mental health crisis. Perhaps she'd met with foul play, encountered someone with bad intentions. Perhaps she'd fallen into water and drowned, her body swept away and never to be recovered. Without evidence, investigators were working blind, unable to focus their efforts in any meaningful direction. Lieutenant Kevin Adams, who coordinated the search efforts, took the case personally. He lost sleep over it, waking up in the middle of the night with new ideas about where to search or what they might have missed. He went back to the maps again and again, studying the terrain, trying to think like a lost hiker, trying to figure out where Maggie could possibly be. The case haunted him. It haunted everyone who worked on it. The search became one of the longest and most expensive in Maine's history. Thousands of hours were spent searching. Hundreds of volunteers gave their time. The costs ran into hundreds of thousands of dollars. But there was nothing. No trace, no evidence, no body. Maggie had simply vanished into the forest as if she'd never existed at all. Roger and Emma began to accept that they might never know what happened. The not knowing was its own special kind of torture. They couldn't grieve properly because they didn't know for certain that Maggie was dead. They couldn't move on because there was always that tiny, impossible hope that maybe she was still alive somewhere. Maybe she'd lost her memory. Maybe she'd been taken by someone. Maybe. The maybes were endless and maddening. Then, on October 14th, 2015, more than 2 years after Maggie vanished, everything changed. A forester named David Walsh was working on Navy land adjacent to the Appalachian Trail. The Navy owned large tracts of land in this area, used for training exercises and research. David had been contracted to conduct an environmental impact survey, documenting trees and wildlife, assessing the health of the forest ecosystem. It was routine work, the kind of thing he'd done hundreds of times. He was working in a particularly dense section of Hemlock Grove, approximately 2 miles west of the Appalachian Trail, and about 2,300 feet from an old logging road called Railroad Road. The area was remote, difficult to access, the kind of place where few people ever ventured. The hemlocks grew thick here, their branches creating a canopy so dense that even in the middle of the day the forest floor remained in perpetual twilight. At 11:23 a.m., while marking a tree, David noticed something that didn't belong. A shape in the shadows that was too regular, too geometric to be natural. He moved closer, pushing aside branches. It was a tent, a small camping tent, collapsed flat against the ground, weathered to a grey-green colour that blended perfectly with the forest around it. Branches and pine needles had accumulated on top of it over the years. If David had been even 10 feet to either side, he never would have seen it at all. His heart sank. He knew immediately what he'd found. There had been a missing hiker a couple years ago. The case had been all over the news. A woman, older, experienced hiker, vanished without a trace. This had to be her. David approached slowly, already pulling out his phone to take photographs. A green backpack sat outside the collapsed tent, faded and weathered but still intact. The solar blanket was still strung between two trees, now torn and grey. There was a pattern of rocks arranged on the ground nearby. It took David a moment to realize they spelled out H-E-L-P. He didn't touch anything. He knew better than that. This was a crime scene, or at least a death scene. He needed to document everything exactly as he found it. He took dozens of photographs from every angle. He marked the GPS coordinates carefully. Then he backed away and called the authorities. The next morning, October 15th, at 5:47 a.m., Lieutenant Kevin Adams received the call he'd been waiting 2 years for. A body had been found. The location matched the area where Maggie Brennan had disappeared. He needed to get there immediately. Adams assembled a recovery team, Maine Warden Service personnel, State Police Evidence Response Team, Naval Criminal Investigation Service agents, because the body was on Navy land, representatives from the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner, even a film crew from Northwood's Law, a documentary series about the Warden Service, was allowed to accompany them to document the recovery. They hiked to the coordinates David Walsh had provided. It took nearly an hour through difficult terrain. When they finally reached the clearing, Adams understood immediately why Maggie had never been found. The campsite was nearly invisible. The campsite was difficult to see unless you were right next to it, Adams later wrote in his official report. The density of the forest, combined with the natural weathering of the tent and gear, created a situation where the camp had essentially disappeared into the environment. We could have walked within 20 feet of this location and never seen it. The tent had collapsed completely, pressed flat against the ground by years of accumulated debris. The solar blanket still hung between trees, but it was torn and faded, no longer reflective. The help sign was still visible, but years of leaf fall had partially obscured it. The entire scene had the feel of something ancient, something that had been there for decades rather than just 2 years. Adams knelt beside the tent. Through the collapsed fabric he could see the outline of a body. I saw a flattened tent with a green backpack outside of it, and a human skull with what I believed to be a sleeping bag around it, he wrote. I was 99% certain this was Maggie Brennan. The recovery team worked carefully, photographing everything before touching anything. They documented the scene from every angle. They collected the backpack, the solar blanket, the camping gear scattered around the site. Everything was bagged and labelled as evidence. When they finally opened the tent, they found Maggie's remains still zipped inside her sleeping bag. She had crawled in for the last time and never emerged. The sleeping bag had protected her body from scavengers, preserving her remains remarkably well considering how long she'd been out here. The medical examiner would later confirm that she died of starvation and exposure, her body simply giving out after weeks without food. How close had Maggie been to help? The calculations were heartbreaking. Railroad Road was 2,300 feet away, less than half a mile. At a normal walking pace, it would have taken her less than 10 minutes to reach it. From the road, it was a short drive to civilization, to help, to rescue. The Appalachian Trail itself was just 2 miles to the east. If Maggie had walked east instead of west, on that first day when she got lost, she would have found the trail in less than an hour. The searchers had come close to her too. The recovery team later determined that search parties had passed within 100 yards of Maggie's position at least 3 times during those first critical weeks. The helicopters had flown directly overhead repeatedly. The tracking dogs had been close, but the density of the forest, the thickness of the undergrowth, the way the terrain folded in on itself, had made her campsite virtually invisible unless you were standing right on top of it. Inside the tent, carefully preserved in a waterproof bag, investigators found Maggie's journal. Adams and his team began reading the entries aloud to each other, documenting them for the official report. After a few pages, Adams stopped them. I realized from listening to the passages being read that there were a lot of personal letters and compositions to family members inside the book, he wrote in his report. These were private, deeply personal writings. They deserved to be read by family first, not by strangers at a recovery scene. They sealed the journal as evidence, preserving it to give to Roger and Emma. They also found Maggie's cell phone, battery long dead. When technicians later examined it, they discovered something heartbreaking. There were 13 unsent text messages stored in the phone's memory. All were addressed to Roger. All were desperate pleas for help, attempted over the course of that first terrible week. All had failed to send because there was no cell signal in this remote location. Roger would later read those messages and break down sobbing. She'd been trying to reach him. She'd been trying so hard, and the messages had just sat there, unsent, unable to bridge the distance between them. They found the pieces of Maggie's credit card buried near the tent, exactly where she'd said they'd be in her journal. Her driver's license was in a clear plastic bag with her other identification. Her pots and pans were neatly stacked. Her first aid kit was organized. Her clothes were folded. Even in her final days, starving and dying, Maggie had maintained order. She'd thought of her family. She'd tried to make it easier for whoever found her. The evidence of her survival efforts was everywhere. Multiple attempted fire pits where she'd tried to create smoke signals. The help sign made from rocks. The solar blanket strung up for visibility. Matches and lighters in her pack. She'd done everything right according to survival protocols. Stay in one place. Make yourself visible. Conserve energy, wait for rescue. She'd followed all the rules. And it hadn't mattered. Roger and Emma were notified that afternoon. Lieutenant Adams drove to Roger's motel room personally to deliver the news. After 26 months of desperate searching, of hoping and grieving and refusing to give up, they finally had their answer. Roger's first response was relief. He actually felt relief. After 2 years of not knowing, of imagining every possible scenario, of the maybes and what-ifs consuming his every waking thought, he finally knew. She was gone. She'd been gone this whole time. But at least now he knew. At least now he could grieve properly. At least now he could bring her home. Then the details started to sink in. She'd survived for 26 days, nearly a month, alone in the wilderness, slowly starving, listening to helicopters search for her but never finding her. The thought was unbearable. Roger broke down completely, sobbing in Adam's arms, asking over and over why they hadn't found her, how they could have missed her, why his Maggie had to die like that. Emma's reaction was different. She was angry, furiously angry. 10 minutes. Her mother had been 10 minutes from a road, 2 miles from the trail, close enough to hear the search helicopters, and she died alone, thinking no one was coming, thinking they'd given up on her. The hardest thing, Emma later said in an interview, was learning how close she was to help, that she didn't know. She died thinking we'd abandoned the search. She died alone, thinking no one was looking anymore. But we were. We never stopped. We were right there. We just couldn't find her. The journal was given to Roger and Emma a week later, after it had been processed as evidence and copied for the investigation. Reading it destroyed them. The early entries were so hopeful, so confident that rescue was coming. The later entries, as hope faded and her body failed, were almost unbearable to read, but it was the final entries that haunted them most. The thing Maggie claimed to see. The presence that visited her tent every night. The heavy breathing. The circling. That final entry. It's in the tent. It's finally in the tent. What had she seen? What had she experienced in those final days? The doctors said it was almost certainly hallucinations. Starvation causes profound changes in brain chemistry. The mind starts to break down, to create things that aren't there. Auditory and visual hallucinations are common. So is paranoia, the feeling of being watched or followed. Everything Maggie described was consistent with the effects of severe malnutrition on the brain. But Roger found himself wondering. Late at night, reading and rereading Maggie's words, he found himself wondering. She'd been so specific, so detailed. The descriptions didn't sound like random hallucinations. They sounded like she was describing something real, something that had actually been there with her. He mentioned this to Lieutenant Adams during one of their conversations. Adams had paused, uncomfortable. "Mr. Brennan," he'd said carefully, "your wife was starving. Her brain was shutting down. What she saw wasn't real." But then he'd paused again and added, "Though I will say, some of the searchers reported odd experiences in that area. Feelings of being watched, strange sounds, equipment malfunctions. Could all be coincidence? Probably is. But it's a strange section of forest. Always has been." A funeral was held for Maggie in November 2015 in Tennessee. Hundreds of people attended. Fellow hikers who'd met Maggie on the trail shared stories of her kindness and determination. Search volunteers who'd spent weeks looking for her came to pay their respects. People who'd never met her, but were moved by her story, filled the church. The hiking community rallied around Roger and Emma, offering support and sharing in their grief. Maggie was cremated. Roger scattered some of her ashes at the trailhead, where she'd begun her journey in Harper's Ferry, West Virginia. The rest he kept. A small wooden cross was placed at the site where she died, erected by the Maine Warden Service with the family's permission. The inscription was simple: "Inchworm, she loved the trail." But Maggie's story didn't end with her death. It changed things. It changed search and rescue protocols across the Appalachian Trail. Her case became a teaching example for how easy it is to miss someone in dense forest, how someone can be mere yards away and remain completely invisible. Search techniques were improved. More resources were allocated to missing hiker cases. The importance of never giving up, of continuing to search even when it seems hopeless, was drilled into every search coordinator. Better cell coverage was installed on remote sections of the trail. The gaps in service that had prevented Maggie's messages from sending were identified and addressed. Personal locator beacons became strongly recommended equipment for all solo hikers. These devices, which can send an SOS signal via satellite, even without cell service, might have saved Maggie's life if she'd had one. The Maine Warden Service used Maggie's case to enhance training programs. New searchers learned about the density of Maine forest, about how terrain and vegetation can hide a person completely, about the importance of checking and rechecking areas that seem to have been thoroughly searched. Tracking dog protocols were improved. Thermal imaging techniques were refined. Everything that could be learned from this tragedy was learned and implemented. Roger became an advocate for hiker safety, working directly with the Maine Warden Service and the Appalachian Trail Conservancy to improve safety measures and search capabilities. He gave talks at hiking clubs and outdoor organizations, sharing Maggie's story, warning people about the dangers of getting even briefly off trail in remote areas. "If Maggie's death means one less family goes through what we did," he told a reporter, "if it means one more hiker makes it home safely, then maybe there's some purpose in all this." But even as Roger worked to find meaning in Maggie's death, he couldn't let go of the questions. He found himself reading her journal obsessively, particularly those final entries about the thing that visited her tent. He researched starvation hallucinations, trying to understand what his wife had experienced. He talked to psychologists and neuroscientists about what happens to the brain when the body is starving. Everyone gave him the same answer: hallucinations, her mind creating phantom company in her isolation. Nothing more. But Roger also did something else, something he never told Emma about, something he never mentioned in interviews. He started researching missing person cases on the Appalachian Trail. He discovered that Maggie wasn't the only one. There had been others over the years, hikers who'd vanished without a trace, later found dead in remote locations. Some of the circumstances were similar to Maggie's, and in a few cases the hikers had left journals or notes describing strange experiences, feelings of being watched, unexplained sounds at night, a sense of presence in the wilderness. Most of these could be explained rationally: the mind playing tricks in isolation, natural fear responses to being alone in the wilderness, the tendency of humans to find patterns and assign meaning to random events. Roger knew that. He understood it intellectually. But something about the consistency of the reports, the similarity of the descriptions, made him wonder. 1 year after Maggie's body was found, Roger returned to Maine. He hiked to the clearing where she'd died, where the wooden cross stood among the hemlocks. He spent the night there, sleeping in a tent just a few feet from where Maggie's tent had been. He needed to be close to her. He needed to spend time in the place where she'd spent her final days. That night, lying in his sleeping bag, Roger heard something. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps circling his tent. He called out, asking if someone was there. Silence. The footsteps continued, around and around. His heart was pounding. He told himself it was an animal. Just a deer. Maybe a bear. Nothing to be afraid of. But the footsteps didn't sound like an animal. They sounded like something walking on two legs. Something large. Something patient. Roger lay there in the darkness listening, his hand on his flashlight but too afraid to turn it on and look outside. The footsteps continued for what felt like hours. Eventually they stopped. Morning came. Roger emerged from his tent and checked the ground around his campsite. No tracks, no footprints, nothing. He never went back. He never told anyone what he'd experienced that night. But he understood, finally, what Maggie had meant in her journal. He understood the fear and the confusion, and the terrible uncertainty of not knowing if what you're experiencing is real or just your mind playing tricks. After that night, Roger stopped questioning Maggie's final entries. It didn't matter if what she'd seen was real or hallucination. It had been real to her. She'd been alone and terrified and dying, and something, whether real or imagined, had kept her company in those final days. Maybe that was a kind of mercy. Maybe it was better than dying completely alone. In the years since Maggie's death, other hikers have reported strange experiences in that section of the Maine wilderness. In 2016, a solo hiker named Thomas Caldwell was camping about a mile from where Maggie died. He reported feeling an overwhelming sense of dread, a feeling so intense that he broke camp in the middle of the night and hiked out by flashlight. I felt compelled to leave, he told rangers. Not scared exactly, but like something didn't want me there. I've hiked for 20 years, spent hundreds of nights alone in the wilderness, and never felt anything like it. It was like the forest itself was telling me to go. In 2017, a group of 3 hikers camping near the ridge where Maggie died reported hearing footsteps circling their tents all night. Heavy, deliberate footsteps. They called out multiple times, thinking another hiker was nearby. No response. In the morning, they searched the area carefully. No tracks, no signs of animals, no explanation for what they'd heard. The forest was completely silent. No birds singing their morning songs, no insects buzzing, nothing, just oppressive silence. In 2018, a couple hiking through the area reported that their GPS device suddenly lost signal and their compass began spinning erratically. The malfunctions continued for about 2 hours, making navigation difficult, then suddenly resolved themselves. Electronic equipment problems in wilderness areas aren't uncommon, but the timing and location struck the hikers as odd. Park rangers who work in that area have their own stories, though most are reluctant to share them officially. Equipment malfunctions are reported more frequently there than in other sections of the forest. Radios cutting out, GPS devices losing signal, compass readings that don't make sense. Most rangers have rational explanations, magnetic anomalies in the rocks, dense tree cover blocking signals, simple equipment failure. But some rangers, particularly those who've worked the area for many years, admit to feeling uncomfortable there. "There's just something about that section," one ranger said off the record. "Can't quite put my finger on it. Just feels different. More isolated, more wild. Like humans aren't really welcome." The rational explanations for all of these experiences are straightforward. Dense forest creates natural anxiety in humans. We're pattern-seeking animals, and we tend to find meaning in random events. Sounds in the forest are distorted, making it difficult to identify sources. Electronic equipment fails more frequently in remote, challenging environments. Psychological factors like isolation and fatigue can create feelings of unease or being watched. But there's also something about deep wilderness that defies easy explanation. Places where humans rarely venture, where the natural world remains largely untouched, where you can walk for days without seeing another person. These places feel different. They are different. They operate according to rules that predate human civilization by millions of years. To indigenous peoples who lived in these forests long before Europeans arrived, these places had spirits, had presence, had power. Modern rationalism dismisses such beliefs as superstition, but maybe, just maybe, there's something there we don't fully understand. The Appalachian Trail stretches 2,190 miles from Georgia to Maine, passing through some of the most beautiful wilderness in North America. 3 million people hike portions of it every year. The vast majority complete their journeys safely, creating memories that last a lifetime, challenging themselves physically and mentally, finding something in the wilderness that they can't find anywhere else. The trail offers transformation, offers revelation, offers a connection to the natural world that modern life rarely provides. But some people, like Maggie Brennan, become part of the trail's darker legacy. They become cautionary tales, warnings about the dangers of wilderness, reminders that nature is indifferent to human plans and dreams and lives. They become ghosts in the forest, their stories told around campfires, their names whispered by hikers who passed the spots where they died. Maggie died believing that something was watching her, something that visited her tent every night for 2 weeks, something that stood at the edge of the clearing and circled her camp in the darkness, something that finally entered her tent in those last hours before death took her. Was it real? Was it hallucination? Does it matter? The medical examiner's report is clear. Maggie died of starvation and exposure. Her body simply gave out after 26 days without food. That's the official conclusion. That's what the evidence shows. That's what science tells us. But science can't explain everything. It can't explain the feelings hikers get in certain places. It can't explain the stories that persist across cultures and generations about things in the deep forest. It can't explain why some places feel welcoming and others feel like trespassing. Late at night, when experienced hikers sit around campfires on the Appalachian Trail and share stories, some talk about that section of Maine wilderness, about the ridge where Maggie Brennan died, about the wooden cross marking the spot, about the strange feeling you get when you hike past it, about the sense that something is watching from deeper in the forest. Most laugh it off. Superstition. Ghost stories. The human tendency to find patterns and meaning in random chance. The power of suggestion making people see things that aren't there. But some hikers don't laugh. Usually the ones who've spent the most time alone in true wilderness, who've hiked thousands of miles through remote terrain, who've experienced things they can't quite explain. They just nod slowly and don't say much, because they've felt it too, that presence in the deep woods, that sense that you're not as alone as you think you are, that feeling that something ancient and patient is watching, observing these temporary visitors to its eternal domain. Roger still hikes once a year to visit Maggie's cross. He brings flowers and leaves them at the base of the hemlocks. He sits in the clearing for a while, talking to his wife, telling her about Emma and the grandchildren and how life has continued without her. He never stays the night anymore. He always makes sure to leave before dark. "I feel close to her there," Roger says. "It's like she's still present somehow, still waiting, still watching over that place. Maybe that's just grief talking. Maybe it's just my mind creating comfort where there isn't any. But I choose to believe she's there, that some part of her stayed in that clearing, that she's not completely gone. Emma doesn't visit. She can't. The thought of the place where her mother died slowly over 26 days is too much for her. But she understands why her father goes. Everyone grieves differently. Everyone finds comfort where they can." The last entry in Maggie's journal haunts them both. "It's in the tent. It's finally in the tent. I can see it." What did she see in those final moments? What came for her at the end? Was it death itself, patient and inevitable, finally claiming what it had been circling for weeks? Was it a hallucination, her starving brain conjuring a final phantom as consciousness faded? Was it something else, something that lives in deep wilderness, something that watches hikers who stray too far from the marked paths? We'll never know. Maggie took the answer with her when she died. What we do know is that she was 10 minutes from help, 2 miles from the trail, close enough to hear helicopters searching for her, and she died alone, her messages to her husband unsent, her calls for help unheard, her survival efforts invisible to the dozens of searchers who came so close but never close enough. Her story is a tragedy. It's a mystery. It's a warning about how quickly things can go wrong in the wilderness, how a single small mistake can cascade into catastrophe. It's a reminder that nature is beautiful and terrible, that the same wilderness that offers peace and transformation can also kill with indifferent efficiency. But it's also something else, something harder to define, a reminder that there are places in this world where humans are visitors, not masters. Places where the rules are different. Places where something might be watching from the shadows between the trees. Places where the darkness is deeper and older than we can comprehend. The Appalachian Trail is one of America's greatest treasures. It offers adventure, challenge, beauty, transformation. But it also demands respect. It demands preparation. It demands humility in the face of nature's power. Before you go, hit that subscribe button to help us reach 1,000 subscribers by New Year's. We're posting daily videos of the most disturbing true cases just like this one. And if you ever hike the Appalachian Trail, especially in Maine's remote sections, bring a personal locator beacon. Bring extra batteries for your phone. Tell people exactly where you're going and when you'll be back. Never, ever step off the trail without marking your route, because the forest doesn't care about your plans, and if you get lost, it might be years before anyone finds you. Maggie Brennan was an experienced hiker. She was prepared, she was careful, and she died anyway, just minutes from help, because she made one small mistake, and the forest never forgave her for it. Stay safe out there. Count your steps. Mark your route. Never assume you can find your way back. And if you're ever hiking alone and you hear something circling your tent at night, something that doesn't sound quite like an animal, something that seems patient and curious and completely unafraid, maybe remember Maggie's story. Maybe remember that sometimes the forest keeps its secrets, and sometimes those secrets are watching you right back. This has been the true story of Margaret Maggie Brennan, who vanished on the Appalachian Trail in July 2013 and survived alone in the wilderness for 26 days before dying just minutes from help. Her story is a tragedy, a mystery, and a warning that the wilderness is beautiful and terrible in equal measure. In memory of Geraldine Inchworm Lagay, 1946 to 2013, and all those lost to the trail, may they find their way home.